Hey, Stewart's Chapel, this is Don Pierson and Don Counts behind the camera, and this is Tuesday, December the 28th devotion, and we've been in a series of devotions on In the Presence of Predators. Today, we're going to be talking or beginning a series within a series. There's like 15 of these daily devotions on this particular scripture, okay? So we're going to be looking in the presence of predators. Little predators take life too. Little predators take life too. Very famous scripture, Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verse 15. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our grapes have tender, for our vines have tender grapes. Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. Over the little over a week, actually almost 2 weeks, we're going to be dealing with the little predators that take life too. This passage, I know there's a lot of background in Song of Solomon, and that's not my purpose. We're talking about predators. Several years ago, I was deer hunting up on my property. I was bow hunting, and a beautiful little spot that right in a midst of a whole lot of oak trees and persimmon trees, and it was early bow season, and I was up in my stand and camouflaged, and everything below was basically totally oblivious to my presence. I'm sitting there, I'm not standing, I'm sitting there, my bow is on its rest, and I see some movement coming down the hill. I'm watching it, and pretty soon I see a gray fox. Beautiful small gray fox. It looked so cute. It was just beautiful little fox. But I noticed that fox was in the hunting mode. It wasn't just trotting through. It wasn't even walking through. It was just kind of sneaking through. It had set its eyes on what I had also been watching, running back and forth through that little meadow, grabbing an acorn and going off, was a little chickmunk. And I watched that chickmunk. I've been watching that chickmunk probably for 20, 30 minutes. And that gray fox evidently had been up on the hillside watching that same area and had been watching that chickmunk too. And it came down creeping in. And had gotten to a place where literally it could see the chickmunk, but the chickmunk couldn't see it. And then all of a sudden, when the chickmunk had its attention on its food and had its back to the fox, that little gray fox just bolted. And it grabbed that chickmunk, and there was just one little squeak, and that was it. And that chickmunk was history. The reason I'm doing this particular series is because we tend to forget that the predator is not always in the form of wolves and lions. The predator takes many shapes. Little predators take life too. I want to draw your attention over here. In my study and preparation for this particular scripture, and the focus is on the vines and the grapes. It says, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. I thought that was interesting. You would have thought it said that for our vines have tender shoots or roots. Catch us the foxes. So in my study on Israel and their vineyards and the foxes, I realized that through my study was that these vineyards would go for miles. They were just long and wide, these long trellises of where the grapes, the vines, old vines that had been trained and pruned many times, trained to run these long trellises. And so in certain times of the year, those vines were bare where they had been pruned and clean, and all the branches had been gathered up and burnt. So in other words, the rows were kept clean, the vineyards were kept clean. But there were certain times of the year, in the late spring and early summer, when the vines would burst forth of life, the vines would shoot their new shoots, they would come up, run down, and then come over and just about touch the ground, creating an umbrella, a canopy of protection that just went right down the line, one line after another of this denseness. In these vines, the birds would come and make their nests. The birds would make their nests in the vineyard, in the vines, and so the foxes knew that it was a place of an abundance of food. There were the eggs, there was the big birds, and then there was all the baby birds. All the nests, plenty to eat. Plus, there was the grapes as well. But there was also that protection. Because you see, during that time, the planter, the farmer, the harvester would not come through because it wasn't time, so they were protected. The foxes would come in there at about the same time that these branches would be done, and they would come in and they would create their dens. They would create their dens under that umbrella of protection. They didn't create their dens just in the middle of the vines. No, they would come in and they make their dens right up against the very stalk or the trunks of the vine, because that's where it was thick. They would go down, they would burrow down into the ground, exposing the roots, getting up under the vine where they were safe, protected by all that root system. They could come in there, so nothing could dig down or get in there. They were protected. The vines would cover, and a farmer couldn't really mess with them during that time, because during that time it was hard to get in there, because you didn't want to damage the vines anymore, because the stock of the vines already had been exposed by the foxes, so any more would just create more damage. The foxes would have their kits or their pups in those dens. Those baby foxes, those little bitty foxes, as they were being born and started, they were playful, and they would chew on those bare roots and chew on them and gnaw on them just like a puppy would. They would come out and they would chew on the trunk and the base just like a dog would. They would run in and out, exposing the vine. The mother would bring in food to them. Pretty soon it's not just one fox that's doing the damage. Now there's a whole litter of foxes that are doing the damage. And as the foxes get bigger, they do more damage. And as they move and as they play and do what they do, they knock the grapes down when they're tender, when they're not yet ripe. The destruction that the foxes did to a vineyard could be massive. So the master of the vineyard, a wise master of the vineyard, would spend his time trapping or killing the foxes, destroying the little predators that take life too. You see, foxes and vines are in a vineyard, they attack the root system. They kill it, they expose it. They bring disease to the vine by exposing its bark, its skin, its underneath. They destroy the fruit. They hinder the growth. The same thing is true as we go through over the next couple of weeks, as we talk about the little predators, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to camp out on the little predators found in Scripture. They do the same thing. They attack our very root, our very foundation. They bring disease and corruption into us. They destroy the fruit that God desires to see from us, and they hinder our growth. You see, catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. There is a great need for you and I not only to beware of the wolves and the lions, but there's a need for you and I to be aware of the little predators that take life too. Love you, Sears Chapel.